The sun was just beginning to rise over London as Jason Statham stepped out of his apartment building. The busy streets that would soon be filled with traffic and noise were still peaceful and quiet. This was his favorite time of day, when he could walk around without being recognized by fans or followed by photographers. He pulled on his gray hoodie and put the hood over his shaved head. In his simple jeans and sneakers, he looked like any regular person going for a morning walk. Jason had been working non-stop for the past 6 months. Between filming action scenes, jumping from buildings, and racing cars, he barely had time to breathe. The movie studio kept him busy from dawn until midnight most days. His body was tired from all the fight scenes, and his mind was exhausted from memorizing lines and doing interviews. This morning walk was the first break he had taken in weeks. He walked slowly down the street toward Hyde Park. The early morning air felt cool against his face, and he took deep breaths, enjoying the fresh smell after last night's rain. A few early joggers passed by him, but nobody looked twice at the famous action star. This was exactly what he needed. No assistants rushing him to meetings, no directors telling him what to do, no cameras following his every move. Just him and the quiet London morning. As Jason entered Hyde Park through the main gate, he felt his shoulders relax for the first time in months. The park was huge, with wide paths winding between old trees and green grass that stretched as far as he could see. Morning mist still hung low over the ground, making everything look soft and dreamlike. He could hear birds singing in the trees and the distant sound of water from the park's many fountains and ponds. Jason chose a path that led deeper into the park, away from the main road. He wanted to get as far away from the city noise as possible. Along the way, he passed a few dog walkers with their pets, trotting happily beside them. An elderly woman sat on a bench feeding pigeons from a bag of breadcrumbs. A maintenance worker was picking up fallen leaves with a long stick. Everyone seemed to be moving slowly and peacefully, just like Jason wanted to feel. The path curved around a small hill covered with flower beds. Jason remembered coming to this same park as a child with his parents. Back then, he dreamed of becoming a professional athlete, or maybe an actor. He never imagined he would become famous for jumping off buildings and fighting bad guys in movies. Sometimes he missed those simple days when his biggest worry was whether it would rain during his soccer game. As he walked further into the park, Jason pulled his phone from his pocket and switched it to silent mode. He did not want any calls or messages to interrupt this peaceful time. His manager would probably try to call about the next movie project. His trainer would want to schedule more workout sessions. The studio executives would have notes about script changes. All of that could wait. Right now, he just wanted to enjoy being a normal person taking a walk in the park. Jason found a quieter section of the park where the path split into 2 directions. He chose the one that led toward the large pond, where he knew there would be ducks and swans swimming peacefully. The morning sun was getting brighter now and beginning to burn away the mist. Soon the park would fill up with more people, but for now he had this peaceful place almost to himself. He walked at a slow, steady pace, not rushing toward any destination. For the first time in months, Jason felt truly relaxed. His mind was not thinking about the next stunt he had to perform or the next interview he had to give. He was just a man enjoying a quiet morning walk in one of London's most beautiful parks. Little did he know that this peaceful morning was about to change in a way that would test everything he believed about right and wrong. Further down the winding path of Hyde Park, an elderly man named Mr. Thompson sat peacefully on a wooden bench near the fountain. He was wearing his favorite brown coat and had a small cup of coffee steaming in his hands. Next to him on the bench lay a folded newspaper that he had been reading before getting lost in thought. The morning was so quiet and beautiful that he found himself just watching the world wake up around him. Beside Mr. Thompson, on a bright red leash, sat the most adorable golden retriever puppy anyone had ever seen. The puppy was only 4 months old, with fluffy golden fur that looked like it had been touched by sunlight. His name was Benny, and he had big brown eyes that seemed to smile at everyone he met. Benny was still learning how to behave on walks, and his tiny tail never stopped wagging with excitement about all the new smells and sights in the park. Mr. Thompson had gotten Benny just 1 month ago after his beloved wife Margaret had passed away. For 45 years, she had been his constant companion and best friend. When she died, their house became so quiet and empty that Mr. Thompson could barely stand to be there. His granddaughter Sarah had suggested getting a puppy to keep him company. At first, he thought he was too old to care for a young dog, but Benny had brought so much joy back into his life. Every morning, Mr. Thompson and Benny came to Hyde Park for their walk. The elderly man enjoyed sitting on benches and watching people while Benny sniffed around and explored. Today, Benny seemed extra curious and energetic. He kept looking around at all the interesting things happening in the park. The puppy had never seen so many different people and dogs all in one place. While Mr. Thompson was reading an article about the weather, Benny noticed something exciting. About 20 meters away near the big stone fountain, 3 young men were standing around talking loudly. They looked like they were in their early 20s and were wearing dark clothes and baseball caps. Benny had never seen these particular people before, and his puppy instincts told him they might have treats or want to play with him. The puppy looked up at Mr. Thompson, who was still reading his newspaper and sipping his coffee. Benny gave a small whimper to get his attention, but the old man was concentrating on his reading. The morning sun was warm on Mr. Thompson's face, and he was enjoying the peaceful moment too much to notice that his curious puppy was getting restless. Benny decided to investigate the 3 men by himself. He had not yet learned that not all people were as kind and loving as his owner. In his innocent puppy mind, every human was a potential friend who might want to pet him or give him treats. He stood up and began walking slowly toward the fountain, his leash dragging behind him on the ground. The fluffy puppy took small, careful steps on his tiny paws. His nose was working overtime trying to smell all the different scents coming from the direction of the 3 men. Benny could smell food and coffee and other dogs that had passed by earlier. Everything was so interesting and exciting to his young mind. As Benny got closer to the fountain, his tail began wagging even faster. He could hear the 3 men laughing and talking, but he could not understand their words. All he knew was that they were people, and in his experience, people meant good things like belly rubs and treats and kind voices saying his name. Mr. Thompson remained on his bench, completely unaware that his precious puppy had wandered away. He was reading about a flower show that was coming to London next week and thinking about whether he should take Benny to see it. The old man had no idea that his beloved companion was walking straight into danger. The 3 young men standing near the fountain were not the kind of people anyone would want to meet on a quiet morning. The leader of the group was a tall, thin man with cold blue eyes and a sneer that never seemed to leave his face. His name was Marcus, and he had been getting into trouble since he was a teenager. The other 2 men, Dave and Tony, always followed whatever Marcus did because they were afraid of him and wanted to look tough like him. Marcus was having a bad morning and was already in an angry mood. He had lost money gambling the night before, and his girlfriend had broken up with him over the phone. Now he was looking for someone or something to take his anger out on. Dave and Tony could tell Marcus was in one of his mean moods, so they just stood quietly and let him do most of the talking. The 3 men were smoking cigarettes and dropping the ash on the ground even though there were trash cans nearby. They were talking loudly about how much they hated their jobs and complaining about everything wrong with their lives. Marcus kept using bad words and making crude jokes that made the other 2 laugh nervously. They did not really think he was funny, but they knew better than to disagree with him. Then Marcus noticed something moving toward them across the grass. It was a small golden puppy walking slowly in their direction, with its leash dragging behind it. The puppy looked happy and innocent, with its tongue hanging out slightly and its tail wagging back and forth. Benny had no idea that he was walking toward 3 men who had no kindness in their hearts. Dave pointed at the approaching puppy and said, "Look at that stupid little dog." Tony laughed and made a comment about how the dog probably belonged to some rich old person who spoiled it. But Marcus just stared at the puppy with disgust growing in his eyes. He had always hated animals, especially dogs, because he thought they were dirty and useless creatures. As Benny got closer, he could sense that something was wrong with these men. Their voices sounded harsh and angry, not like the gentle voice of Mr. Thompson. But the innocent puppy did not understand why anyone would want to hurt him. All his short life he had only known love and kindness from humans. He thought these men might just be having a bad day and needed a friendly face to cheer them up. Benny walked right up to the three men and sat down in front of them. His big brown eyes looked up at them hopefully, and his tail continued wagging, even though he was starting to feel scared. The puppy made a small happy sound, hoping one of the men would bend down to pet him or say something nice. Marcus looked down at the trusting little creature and felt nothing but hatred. The puppy reminded him of everything soft and innocent that he had learned to despise. Without any warning, Marcus drew back his right foot and kicked Benny as hard as he could in the ribs. The steel toe of his boot connected with the puppy's small body with a sickening thud. Benny let out a sharp cry of pain and surprise as he was knocked sideways onto the grass. The innocent puppy had never felt such pain before and could not understand why the man had hurt him. He tried to get back on his feet, but his little body was shaking with shock and fear. His brown eyes that had been full of hope just moments before were now filled with confusion and terror. Dave and Tony burst into cruel laughter as they watched the puppy struggle. Marcus smiled with satisfaction and made a nasty comment about teaching the stupid dog a lesson. The three men stood over Benny enjoying his pain while the helpless puppy whimpered softly and tried to crawl away from them. Jason Statham had been walking along the tree-lined path about 50 meters behind the three men when the terrible sound reached his ears. It was the sharp cry of pain from a small animal followed by cruel laughter that made his blood run cold. He had been enjoying the peaceful morning thinking about nothing important when this sound shattered the quiet like breaking glass. At first Jason thought he might have imagined it. The sound came from near the fountain ahead of him, but he could not see clearly what was happening because some large trees blocked his view. He quickened his pace, wanting to get a better look at whatever was going on. As he got closer, he could hear the voices of men talking and laughing in a way that made him feel uneasy. Jason moved quietly off the main path and walked behind a row of bushes so he could see without being seen. What he witnessed made his hands clench into fists and his jaw tighten with anger. Three young men were standing over a small golden puppy that was lying on the ground trying to get back on its feet. The puppy was clearly hurt and scared, but the men were laughing as if they found its pain entertaining. The action star had seen many terrible things in the movies he made, but this was real life. A helpless, innocent creature was suffering while cruel people enjoyed watching it. Jason had grown up with dogs and cats and had always believed that how people treat animals shows their true character. These three men had just shown him exactly what kind of people they were. Jason watched as Marcus, the leader of the group, said something nasty about the puppy while Dave and Tony continued laughing. Their voices carried clearly in the morning air, and Jason could hear every cruel word they spoke. He saw the small dog trying desperately to crawl away from them, but moving slowly because of the pain from being kicked so hard. Years of playing tough guys in action movies had prepared Jason for moments like this. He knew how to control his anger and channel it into focused action. But this was not a movie scene with cameras and directors and stunt coordinators. This was real, and a defenseless animal was being hurt by people who thought they could get away with it because no one was watching. Jason felt his heart rate increase as adrenaline began flowing through his body. He had trained for years in martial arts and knew exactly how to handle bullies like these three men. But he also knew he had to be smart about this. If he just rushed in without thinking, he might make things worse for the puppy or get himself into legal trouble. He took a deep breath and started planning his approach. Jason needed to get close enough to stop them from hurting the dog anymore, while also making sure they understood that their behavior was completely unacceptable. He had dealt with bad guys in movies, but these were real bullies hurting a real animal in the real world. The famous actor moved carefully through the trees, getting closer to the scene without being noticed. He could see that the puppy was alive, but clearly in pain and very frightened. The three men were still standing over it, making jokes and comments that made Jason even more angry than before. Jason knew that in about 30 seconds he was going to reveal himself to these three cruel men. They had no idea that one of Hollywood's toughest action stars had witnessed their cowardly act of animal cruelty. They thought they were alone and could hurt innocent creatures without any consequences. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The moment of confrontation was coming, and Jason was ready. Jason Statham stepped out from behind a large oak tree where he had been watching the cruel scene unfold. His movements were calm and controlled, but there was something in the way he walked that made the air around him feel dangerous. The three men were still laughing and making jokes about the injured puppy when they suddenly became aware of someone approaching them with purpose. Marcus was the first to notice the figure walking toward them. At first, he thought it was just another morning jogger or dog walker who would mind their own business and keep walking. But as the man got closer, Marcus could see that this person was walking directly toward them with steady, determined steps. There was something about the way he moved that made Marcus feel uncomfortable. Dave and Tony also noticed the approaching stranger, and their laughter slowly died away. The man was wearing a gray hoodie with the hood pulled up, but they could see his face clearly now. He had strong features and cold eyes that seemed to be staring right through them. There was something familiar about him, but they could not quite figure out what it was. Jason stopped about 3 meters away from the group and slowly pulled back his hood, revealing his famous face. The recognition hit all three men at exactly the same time. Dave actually took a step backward while Tony opened his mouth in surprise. Marcus tried to keep his tough expression, but Jason could see the fear starting to show in his eyes. "Did you just kick that dog?" Jason asked in a voice that was quiet but filled with controlled anger. His words hung in the morning air like a threat. The question was simple, but the way he asked it made it clear that he already knew the answer and that there would be consequences for what they had done. Marcus tried to maintain his tough guy attitude, even though his heart was racing with fear. He shrugged his shoulders and made a dismissive gesture toward the injured puppy. "It's just a stupid dog," he said, trying to sound like he did not care. But his voice cracked slightly as he spoke, and Jason could hear the nervousness behind his words. Tony and Dave remained silent, wishing they could disappear or run away, but too scared to move. They had heard stories about Jason Statham and knew he was not just an actor but someone who had real fighting skills. The muscles in his arms and shoulders were clearly visible even under his loose hoodie, and his hands looked like they belonged to someone who knew how to use them. Jason looked down at the small puppy that was still trying to get back on its feet. The innocent creature was shaking with fear and pain, while these three cowards stood over it like they had accomplished something great. The sight of the helpless animal suffering made Jason even more angry than before. "You think it's funny to hurt something that cannot fight back," Jason said, as he took another step closer to Marcus. His voice was still calm, but every word carried the weight of his fury. "Real tough guys picking on a helpless puppy. I bet you feel really proud of yourselves right now." Marcus wanted to say something back, but the words would not come out of his mouth. He had bullied smaller people and hurt innocent animals before, but he had never faced someone like Jason Statham. This was not some frightened old man or defenseless animal. This was someone who could probably break all three of them without breaking a sweat. The confrontation was reaching its peak, and Jason was just getting started. He had not even touched any of them yet, but already they looked like they wanted to run away. The famous action star was about to show them what real toughness looked like. What happened next was so fast that the three men barely had time to react. Jason Statham moved with the speed and precision of someone who had spent years training for action scenes and learning real fighting techniques. Marcus tried to take a step backward, but before he could move, Jason grabbed him by the front of his shirt and effortlessly lifted him off the ground. Marcus found himself face to face with one of the world's most famous action stars, and he could see the fury burning in Jason's eyes. The bully who had seemed so tough when kicking a helpless puppy now looked like a scared child hanging in the air. His feet dangled uselessly as he tried to grab at Jason's hands, but could not break free from the iron grip. Without any warning, Jason spun around and threw Marcus to the ground like he was throwing away a piece of trash. The cruel man hit the grass hard and rolled several feet before coming to a stop. He lay there gasping for breath and trying to figure out what had just happened to him. His tough guy act had disappeared completely, and now he just looked like what he really was, a coward. Dave and Tony watched in shock as their leader was handled so easily by Jason. They had seen Marcus pick fights with other people before, and he always seemed so strong and dangerous. But against Jason Statham, he looked weak and pathetic. Both men took several steps backward, wanting to run away, but too afraid to move in case Jason turned his attention to them next. Jason stood over Marcus, who was still lying on the ground trying to catch his breath. The famous actor had not even broken a sweat and looked like he could do the same thing to all three men without any effort. His years of training and staying in shape for movie roles had made him incredibly strong and fast. "You like picking on things that cannot defend themselves," Jason said, looking down at Marcus with disgust. "How does it feel when someone picks on you instead?" His voice was calm but filled with controlled anger that made all three men understand they had made a terrible mistake. Marcus tried to get back on his feet, but his legs were shaking too much to support him properly. He looked up at Jason with fear in his eyes and started to mumble an apology, but the words came out weak and unclear. The man who had kicked an innocent puppy just minutes ago now could not even speak properly. Jason turned his attention to Dave and Tony, who were standing frozen with terror about 10 feet away. "You two think this is funny?" he asked them in the same quiet, threatening voice. "Do you enjoy watching innocent animals get hurt?" Neither man could answer because their mouths were too dry with fear to form words. The action star then did something that surprised everyone. Instead of attacking the other two men, he knelt down next to the injured puppy. His angry expression changed to one of gentle concern as he carefully examined the small animal. The puppy looked up at him with big brown eyes that seemed to understand that this person was trying to help. Jason spoke softly to the puppy using the kind of voice people use with babies and small children. The injured animal stopped shaking quite so much and even managed to wag its tail slightly. It was clear that despite his pain, the puppy could sense that Jason was a friend, not an enemy like the three men. Marcus finally managed to stand up, but he swayed unsteadily on his feet. Dave and Tony remained motionless, afraid that any movement might bring Jason's anger back to them. All three bullies now realized they had picked the wrong target and were facing consequences they never expected. Jason Statham carefully picked up the injured puppy using both hands to support its small body. The little dog was still shaking but seemed to understand that Jason was trying to help. Benny looked up at the famous actor with his big brown eyes and made a soft, whimpering sound that broke Jason's heart. The puppy was clearly in pain but was trying to be brave. Looking around the park, Jason spotted an elderly man sitting on a bench about 60 meters away. The man was looking around frantically and calling out what sounded like a dog's name. Jason realized this must be the puppy's owner, who had finally noticed his beloved pet was missing. The old man looked worried and scared as he stood up from the bench and started walking in different directions trying to find his dog. Jason began walking toward the elderly man while holding the puppy gently against his chest. Behind him, the three bullies remained where they were too frightened to move or try to escape. Marcus was still sitting on the ground holding his side where he had hit the earth hard. Dave and Tony stood nearby looking like they wanted to disappear into the ground. As Jason got closer to the elderly man, he could hear him calling, "Benny, Benny, where are you, boy?" The desperation in the old man's voice was clear, and Jason could see tears forming in his eyes. This was obviously more than just a pet to him. This was a beloved companion who meant everything to a lonely person. The elderly man, whose name was Mr. Thompson, noticed someone walking toward him carrying what looked like a small dog. His heart began racing with hope and fear as he recognized the golden fur of his precious Benny. But he was confused about why a stranger was carrying his puppy and worried about what might have happened. Jason approached Mr. Thompson with a gentle expression on his face, trying not to frighten the old man any more than he already was. "Sir, is this your dog, Jason?" asked in a kind voice that was completely different from the threatening tone he had used with the three bullies just minutes before. Mr. Thompson looked at Jason with surprise and relief flooding his face at the same time. "Yes, yes, that's my Benny," he said, reaching out his arms toward his beloved pet. "What happened to him?" As he heard the old man's voice shook with emotion as he saw that his puppy was not moving around like normal. Jason carefully transferred the injured puppy into Mr. Thompson's waiting arms. The reunion was immediate and heartwarming as Benny seemed to recognize his owner and snuggled against him, making small happy sounds despite his pain. Mr. Thompson held his pet close to his chest and spoke softly to him in the gentle voice of someone who truly loves their animal. "I saw 3 men kick your dog near the fountain," Jason explained, keeping his voice calm so as not to upset the elderly man anymore. "I stopped them and brought Benny back to you, but I think he should see a veterinarian to make sure nothing is seriously wrong." Mr. Thompson looked shocked and angry when he heard what had happened to his innocent puppy. Who would do such a terrible thing to a harmless little dog? He asked with tears now flowing freely down his cheeks. Benny has never hurt anyone in his life. He just wants to make friends with everyone he meets. Jason could see how much the puppy meant to this lonely old man, and his heart went out to both of them. He pointed back toward the fountain, where the 3 men were still standing. "Those 3 over there, but don't worry, they won't be bothering any more animals." The way Jason said this made it clear that the bullies had learned their lesson. Mr. Thompson thanked Jason over and over again while holding Benny protectively in his arms. Within an hour of the incident, news of what had happened began spreading through social media like wildfire. Several early morning joggers and park visitors had recognized Jason Statham, and some had managed to record parts of the confrontation on their phones from a distance. The videos were shaky and taken from far away, but they clearly showed the famous action star confronting 3 men and then helping an injured puppy. The first video appeared on Twitter with the caption, "Famous actor Jason Statham stops animal cruelty in Hyde Park this morning." The post was shared hundreds of times within the first few minutes. Soon more videos from different angles started appearing on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. People who had witnessed the event from various distances all wanted to share what they had seen. By lunchtime, the story was trending on all major social media platforms. News websites picked up the story and began reporting on how Jason Statham had intervened to protect a helpless puppy from 3 cruel men. Animal rights organizations shared the videos praising Jason for using his fame and physical presence to stand up for an innocent creature that could not defend itself. Meanwhile, back at Hyde Park, the 3 bullies found themselves in serious trouble. Park security had arrived within 20 minutes of the incident after being called by several witnesses. The security cameras throughout the park had recorded clear images of Marcus kicking the puppy and of all 3 men laughing at the animal's pain. Marcus, Dave, and Tony were arrested by police who arrived shortly after park security. Their faces had been captured clearly on multiple security cameras, and several park visitors had given statements about what they had witnessed. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and they could not deny what they had done. The 3 men were charged with animal cruelty, which was a serious crime in England. Marcus, as the one who had actually kicked the puppy, faced the most severe charges. Dave and Tony were charged as accomplices for encouraging the cruel act and laughing while it happened. All 3 were banned from every park in London while they waited for their court date. Local news stations sent reporters to interview people who had been in the park that morning. Many witnesses described how shocked they had been to see someone kick an innocent puppy and how relieved they felt when Jason Statham stepped in to stop it. One jogger said she had been too far away to help but was grateful that someone with the strength to intervene had been there. Jason Statham received thousands of messages from fans around the world thanking him for protecting the helpless puppy. His social media accounts were flooded with positive comments and people sharing their own stories about animal cruelty they had witnessed. Many fans said they already admired him as an actor, but now they respected him even more as a person. Animal shelters and rescue organizations across the country reached out to Jason asking if he would become a spokesperson for their causes. They wanted to use his fame and the attention from this incident to raise awareness about animal cruelty and promote better treatment of pets. Several organizations offered to name him as an honorary board member. The story even reached international news with reports appearing on television and in newspapers around the world. The headline, "Hero Actor Stops Animal Abuse," appeared in multiple languages as the story spread globally. People everywhere were inspired by Jason using his strength to protect something innocent and defenseless. Miss Thompson and Benny also became minor celebrities in their neighborhood. People stopped them during their daily walks to check on the puppy's recovery and to hear the story firsthand. The elderly man was amazed by how many people cared about his beloved pet and wanted to make sure Benny was okay. 6 months after the incident in Hyde Park, the effects of what Jason Statham had done that morning were still being felt around the world. The story had become more than just news about a celebrity helping an animal. It had turned into a symbol of how ordinary people could stand up for those who cannot defend themselves and make a real difference in the world. Jason had used the attention from the incident to become a powerful voice for animal rights. He worked with several major animal welfare organizations and had donated over £1 million to animal shelters across the United Kingdom. His publicist had initially worried that getting involved in the animal cruelty incident might hurt his tough guy image, but it had actually made him more popular than ever before. The actor started a foundation called Paws for Justice that helped fund legal cases against people who abused animals. The foundation also provided support for elderly people who needed help caring for their pets. Jason often visited animal shelters during his free time and had adopted 2 rescue dogs of his own. He said that helping animals had given him more satisfaction than any movie role he had ever played. Miss Thompson and Benny had recovered completely from their frightening experience. The puppy showed no lasting physical effects from being kicked and had grown into a healthy, happy young dog. More importantly, Benny seemed to have forgotten the cruelty he experienced and still approached all people with the same trusting, friendly attitude he had always had. The elderly man had become something of a local celebrity in his neighborhood. Children often stopped him during his walks with Benny to hear the story of how Jason Statham had saved his dog. Mr. Thompson enjoyed telling the tale and always made sure to mention how important it was to be kind to animals and to speak up when you see someone being cruel. Jason still visited Mr. Thompson and Benny regularly during his morning walks in Hyde Park. The 3 had developed an unlikely but genuine friendship. Mr. Thompson would bring tea in a thermos, and they would sit on their favorite bench while Benny played nearby. Jason found these quiet moments with his new friend to be some of the most peaceful parts of his busy life. The 3 men who had hurt Benny faced serious consequences for their actions. Marcus was sentenced to 6 months in jail and had to pay a large fine. He was also required to do community service at an animal shelter for 2 years after his release. Dave and Tony received smaller punishments, but were also required to do community service and attend anger management classes. More importantly, the story had inspired thousands of people around the world to take action when they witnessed animal cruelty or bullying of any kind. Animal rights groups reported that more people were calling to report abuse and more volunteers were offering to help at shelters. The phrase, "What would Jason do?" became popular on social media when people talked about standing up for others. Schools began using the story as an example of how fame and strength should be used to protect those who need help. Children wrote essays about the importance of being kind to animals and standing up to bullies. Many teachers said the story had helped them teach lessons about empathy, courage, and doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Jason often said in interviews that the morning he helped Benny was one of the most important days of his life. It had reminded him that being strong was not about fighting or looking tough, but about protecting innocent creatures and standing up for what was right. The incident had changed him from just an action star into someone who used his fame to make the world a better place for everyone.